Yeah, welcome everyone to our episode 3 of our Changing Transport Insights webinar. In this series, we talk about the work of GIZ on transport and climate change across the world. The series is meant to share with the wider public, but also with specifically the climate and development community, what we do at a country level and how we work in GIZ, what our results are, and also share some of our learnings and insights from the work on transport and climate change in diverse country contexts. In this webinar series, we plan to have about 15 to 20 minutes of presentation by a GIZ expert, and then use the remaining maybe 20 minutes for your questions and comments. Today, our focus country is China, where GIZ has a long history of more than a decade of working on sustainable transport with the Chinese governments and other public and private counterparts. And my guest and presenter today is Xia Yun. Xia Yun has been with GIZ also for more than a decade. She currently works as a technical advisor for the mobility team in China, mainly with the project Sino-German Cooperation on Low Carbon Transport, but also as a component lead for the NDC Transport Initiative in Asia, which is a regional project that also works in India and in Vietnam. Before you joined GIZ, you worked as an interpreter for a German construction company on the topic of high-speed railways. So even as an interpreter, you focused on transport. So I'm really happy that you are our guest today, and you will not only your current work, but also the previous projects and activities that you've been involved in GIZ. So I'm really looking forward to your insights. So without further ado, I would hand over the floor to you, Xia Yun. Feel free to jump right into your presentation, or however you have planned it. You have about 15 to 20 minutes now for your slides.
Thanks, Frido. Hope everyone can see my presentation.
Yes.
Yes. And yeah, thanks for the introduction and for inviting me to this very interesting workshop webinar series. And as Frido mentioned, I'm happy to be here to introduce my experience or my story about EV uptake in China, which is in our framework of Sino-German cooperation for climate protection. And today I wanted to especially thank you, Frido and Xiadi, for supporting me to prepare the presentation. And give an insight in China. Sorry, first of all, the overview of my presentation simply divided in 3 parts: EV development background in China, and our projects, my story, and some outlook for the future. So background for Chinese transport sector. Transport decarbonizing in a decarbonizing strategy, is it a hard nut to crack? I think for China it's really big challenge, because transport has a share of about 11% of China's carbon dioxide emissions, considered to be a major driver of the country's increase in energy consumption and carbon emission over the next few decades. So many experts have the statement that transport is most likely the only sector which will not reach the carbon peaking before 2030. You might know that in 2020, China announced its climate goals, that China will aim at reach the carbon peaking in 2030 and achieve the carbon neutrality in 2060. So transport will be a very important sector to achieving the dual carbon targets for China, which is top level strategic goals for China's further development. So there are two very simple graphics. Here you can see the emission and sources in China's transport sector, and there's a big share of gasoline and diesel emission from gasoline and diesel in China's transport sector. That means we need very urgent actions to transit the transport sector from the traditional conventional fuel to new energies. And in the second graphic, you can see the road transportation has biggest share of China's emission in 2019. So not only in the freight but also the passenger transport. Therefore, I think according to our analysis in this field, the road transport decarbonization and the electrification is very important for the decarbonization strategy in China. And this graphic is from our NDC-TIA project, which has been developed by WRI. We analyzed the potential of electrification of vehicles in the future, and we will point out that vehicle electrification has the largest decarbonizing potential, contributing about 48% of the cumulative greenhouse gas emission reduction from the BAU scenario to the deep decarbonizing scenario during 2020 to 2016. So that means if we keep our development trend in China in the direction, and maybe in the future, not maybe, but in the future, the electrification of vehicles will provide the biggest contribution to the decarbonizing strategy. That is the reason why we wanted to push it forward and carry out our work in vehicle electrification in China and EV uptake in China. So China has already achieved a very big achievement for EV uptake. So here is the historical data of the electromobility development on the world. You can see in 2010 in China and in the world, the EV amount is really low. And now China has the biggest share of EV market, EV ownership in the world. So according to the report of CAAM, by the end of 2022, the national ownership of NEV, that is EVs in China, reached 13 million units, accounting for about 4.1% of the total number of vehicles. So China becomes more confidential for their emission development. So they set it a big, very ambitious target for EV uptake and promotion, like for public transport and for taxis and urban logistic fleets, and will further develop the charging infrastructure and alternative technology roadmaps for the EV development, like battery swapping, and also they will pay more attention on EV battery recycling, because after EV uptake, there will be more and more traction batteries in the market, which will be phased out, and they will establish the battery recycling system in an early stage. And also, currently the vehicle automation and smart infrastructure is a very hot topic in China EV field. So I think China has already taken the advantage of its EV development and have very significant achievement currently. Now we come to our projects as the main part of my story. So on the initial stage of EV uptake in China, we started with our first project, the electromobility project in China in 2009. At that time, so everyone is not that sure that if China will promote EV on a very top strategic level, and also on the world, there are many discussions about the range of batteries, about the feasibility of EV uptake. So we discussed, analyzed with the stakeholders and the research institutions about the EV promotion scenarios, and we provide our suggestions to the Chinese government. If we have a scaling up of EV in China, how is the environmental and the climate impact in the Chinese cities and on the country level? I think we worked with Tsinghua University and developed a research report on the scenarios of the impact assessment on EV's uptake, and I think it's a very good suggestion for Chinese government to make their decision. And we also facilitated different platforms, which I wanted to highlight is the EV battery recycling platform, because it's really on a very, very early stage for that, for this battery recycling system preparation. And now we worked with Caltech, which is one of the most important stakeholder in China Automotive Technical Research Center. And we discussed in our Sino-German working group meeting on battery recycling about the feasibility of battery recycling system, about the management and the technologies. So it provide the fundament of the cascade using utilization and battery recycling system for China. And now China has already initially established the battery recycling system. I think that is one contribution from our GIZ, from our project to the EV development in China. We also explored a potential of EV in car sharing, and provided a car sharing report for China in this project, and also organized dialogues between government and industry, because at that time the industry need more information, more signal from the government, and we organized dialogues, workshops to explore the potentials and of roadmaps and the opportunities together. So I think as the implementation was quite successful, and China was successfully established the cooperation with Germany in the field of EV development and standardization. Around 2016, China's EV market has scale. Has been scaling up So in the private car area, China has achieved its market goals in 2016, but we found that commercial EVs will be another important area in China at that time. So in previous project, low carbon transport, we supported the setting of temporary loading and unloading parking zones for electric freight vehicles in Foshan, Guangdong province, in order to promote the e-logistic vehicles and facilitated dialogues on decarbonizing HDV or long distance transport and urban delivery vehicles, and conducted studies on e-buses and urban delivery vehicles. So taking the temporary loading and unloading parking zones, for example, because the cost of parking in Chinese cities are relatively high, and if we wanted to promote the EVs, the stakeholders would like to consider about the cost of the EV operation. Foshan has designed the temporary loading and parking zones for EVs, which where we could park the EVs for free. So with cooperating with research institutions, we successfully promoted this demonstration, and the Foshan will extend the parking zones for the electric freight vehicles in the future. And I think that is one highlight, because it's a non-fiscal measure for uptake the commercial EVs. So coming into ongoing project, my current project is NDC Transport Initiative for Asia. In this project, we will focus on increase the climate ambitions in Asia countries. So on this stage, I think the discuss about private cars will be not the only focus for us, but we also wanted to explore more measures, more possibilities to enhance the climate ambitions in China and the EV uptake ambitions. So we conducted studies in order to promote urban logistic electric vehicles. We conducted the study in Beijing, and we also wanted to integrate the EV topic in a holistic strategy in China. Like, we will support the China's decarbonizing strategy from different perspectives, like emission standard and other emission zones, which will have the impact of the EV uptake in China. And we're also facilitating exchanges on relatively new topics like decarbonizing supply chain in the automotive industry and so on, in order to give more insights and perspectives in the EV development in the future. So I think my story is not that long, because I didn't go through very detail, but the cooperation since 10 years, I think is very important for China's development in this area. taking a look into the challenges in the climate protection work in China, we analyzed the main challenges like growing demand of transport and uncertainty in emission reduction measures. So I think the challenges are the same to the EV industry or the EV policy decision making, because the China's demand of transport or of vehicles is still increasing gradually. The number of car ownership in China is still relatively low. So I think there's a big potential to uptake the EVs in China, especially in the rural area, because now in the rural area, everyone wanted to have convenient transport connection, and they have a big higher demand as before to procure the EV and EV fleets. And also the emission reduction measures has uncertainty because of the energy supply and infrastructure and other development. I think for EVs, which is important, is to really thinking about the scenarios of EV application. Like if we really wanted to promote the fuel cell vehicles for long distance or even in the urban area, so how could we utilize the resources in a climate-friendly way, but not only for the market development. And also capital will be a big topic or discussion in this field, because if we looking at decarbonizing the whole automotive industry, if we will put more and more EVs in the market, the whole industry chain will be also a potential emission source in the future. So how could we better allocate our funding to decarbonizing this industry, and how could we cooperate from the transport perspective together with the energy sector, because everyone knows that yes, EV is zero emission car, but zero emission vehicles, but the power, the grid plays a big role for the whole life cycle emission. And also for carbon emission accounting system, if we wanted to accounting the carbon footprint of the EV industry, there's a gap of like standardization and calculation system in this area. So I think our story is that we will dynamically implement our project activities and keep to find more potential topics in this area. Since China has the biggest market in the world, we also wanted to bring the mutual beneficials for China and Germany and for the world. And we will in the future we will thinking about like how could we bring the experiences of China and Germany to other countries. How could we support the feasibility of EV uptake of our partners in China, Germany, and in other countries? Electrification of HDVs, of heavy-duty vehicles, will be a potential topic because currently in China, the roadmap, the technical roadmap of HDVs is not that clear. I think every technology has its potential, like the battery heavy-duty vehicles, fuel cell vehicles, and catenary trucks. but the scenario, the utilization scenario should be further explored, and like the cost and other political policy support will be a potential window for us to conduct our project activities. And clean energy supply will also be a topic for the future, but I think it's everyone has noticed that this is a very important issue for uptaking EVs. So I think the sector coupling and cross-agency cooperation will be very important for us. Supply chain is another important topic, and we conducted a workshop last month on decarbonizing supply chain in the automotive industry and focus on EVs. So China has wish to cooperate with Germany in this area, and we will also explore the potentials of this cooperation. For sure, innovative technologies and innovative business models will also play big role in the further development and in our further project activities. And I think that's all of my story, but I still wanted to have some discussion with you. Hope you will like my story, and for the outlook and other open questions, please feel free to discuss with me and exchange with me. Yes, this is my contact. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Sayud, for the great presentation. Really good story that you shared, focused on the work that we have done and highlighting some of the major impacts of that work. So if you have a question or you would make a comment, raise your hand and turn on your camera. So you will be available for the next 10 to 15 minutes for a discussion with us. So while you consider your questions, I'll start with one, Sayun. You mentioned that you have started work on decarbonizing the supply chain for the electric vehicle industry. Could you give us some insights into the emission reduction measures or the activities in this field? How to decarbonize the supply chain? Your microphone.
Yes, thanks.
Sorry, we cannot hear you. Could you start over again?
Hello?
Yeah, no.
Yes. So I think the electrification or the transition of the automotive industry will have the impact on this whole industry of automotive, and the car manufacturing has a very long supply chain, so it is very complicated. And China has started the discussion in a very, very early stage, but currently I think the main idea is not that quite clear. How could we establish the standardization, or how could we do concrete actions? But last time we discussed with the Chinese and German expert, Mr. Wu Zhixing, he mentioned that this is a trend for China, also for the global automotive industry. And Mr. Wu Ye has mentioned from the Tsinghua University has mentioned that China is working on the carbon emission accounting boundaries for automotive industry in order to have a clear view of the whole of the emission of the whole supply chain. So I think they are proactively working on this, and the enterprises, the suppliers and OEMs, they are also actively working on the carbon footprinting area. Like we also, but now there are different norms, standardizations, and regulations. Still in China, we need identified system for that. So this accounting system is still to be further developed. I hope I answered your question, because there's no single system or regulations for that.
Yeah. But it sounds like a topic that is really where international dialogue is important, because the supply chains are also global, and
yes,
especially the connection between China and Germany with the automotive industry says this strong industrial connection. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hear more about this in the future. We have one more question from Bhagyasri. The question is whether you have any insights on the challenges faced while facilitating the battery recycling, the dialogue among stakeholders. So the question is also here in the chat.
So I think the related dialogues in China, because in our project implementation, I think the Chinese stakeholders are very supportive and quite active in this discussion. But there are many challenges in the practice, like how to collect the batteries, who it will be the responsible unit to put the batteries to recycling system. So China has already released policy for regulation for the battery recycling system, but still there's big discussion on it, and need more practices. For example, if we how could we ensure that all the batteries, not only from the users, but also from battery manufacturing, could be brought into the recycling system, and how could we have a competitive price of the companies who qualified companies in comparing to the illegal companies, because there are many small factories who is working on the battery recycling, and they will provide higher cost, higher price for the battery recycling, and the companies who is qualified for that, they are struggling in the price problem. But China has started to develop a list for such qualified companies for battery recycling, and wanted to protect them in the market. So I think this dialogue continues, and for Germany, I think the CATL has already established its base in Germany, and also they will play an important role in the battery recycling and battery supply chain area. Not only CATL, but also other stakeholders. There's a big potential for us to discuss it further, because this the battery recycling stage comes in China around 2023, and China will provide more experiences for the practices.
Thank you. We have two further questions from Tony Timoni. Do you want to raise the question yourself, or should I read it out?
Thanks. I can do it either way. Thanks, Ian, for the very nice presentation. So I had a question. So in your presentation, you had mentioned for the outlook, no? So an important outlook would be sourcing from clean energy source. So in that, I had two questions on that. So like, how effective has EVs been in the curtailment of reducing the curtailment of RE generation in China? And the second would be, what have been the new market mechanisms that have been adopted, no, to increase the adoption of EVs via like V2X and smart charging? So yeah, if you had any input on that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Oh, it's a very good question, but for me, it's really difficult to answer. I think so. The V2X topic has been started for several years, and China's state grid is actively promote the interactions between EVs and the grid. But I don't have enough information for that. Maybe I can answer you afterwards after I ask the expert in this field.
Sure. That'd be great. Thanks.
Then we have another question from Rabea. Rabea, feel free to ask a question yourself.
Okay, so I was wondering how the vehicle stock is projected to develop if we say now we have around 4% of electric cars of the stock, and the NEV sales are about 16% of current sales. So how is that going to develop in the context of a motorization that is growing, of urbanization that you mentioned, and also the current vehicle stock phasing out or being too old to stay on the roads? Maybe you have any insight on that.
So I think it's different for passenger vehicles and the heavy duty vehicles. So firstly, in China, I think just one moment. So in China, the private vehicle, the car will be only used for 15 years or over 700,000 kilometers. And there are some scenarios for the ownership, but I think firstly there's big potential for the uptake of vehicles. Firstly, so the number of vehicles will keep increasing, and but the EVs, I think last year EVs has a very good sale in the Chinese market, but in this year after the phase out of the procurement subsidies, we will see if EV will still have the advantages. As far as I know, the local government they are providing subsidies for EV purchasing on the local level, but still I think I'm optimistic of the EV development, but the demand of vehicle purchasing, vehicle stock is still high in China. Around, I think, until 2030, there's gradually increasing in China.
That's helpful. Thank you. And maybe if we have time for one last question.
One last question and one quick answer, please.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I got distracted. Now I forgot it. So sorry.
Okay, if the question does not come to your mind right now, then I would take the opportunity to wrap up the meeting, unless anyone else wants to jump in with a final question.
Oh, I found it in my head.
You
What is
found it. Okay,
currently
go ahead.
the cost of a battery electric vehicle and an ICE vehicle, like a simple small car? How would the cost compare without the subsidies?
So without the subsidies, the price of EVs is much higher than the conventional vehicle. I will find an example for a small for light duty vehicle. So like for normal conventional vehicle, it cost. I think it will cost about around 50,000 lower than the EVs compared to the same size and the same like quality.
Then another question just came in. What would be the percentage of emissions from each vehicle segment? I think that was mentioned in the beginning of your presentation. So, Tony, I would suggest that when we share the recording afterwards, you can refer to that slide that shows the breakdown of emissions by vehicle segment. Because we have come to the end of our scheduled time, I would like to thank you, Xiaoyun, for your very clear and insightful presentation, and of course, your colleagues for coming and for raising questions. We will for sure continue this series and come out soon with the next dates and next countries we're going to showcase. So stay tuned for more information and have a good rest of the day, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're based.